The night was unusually still at the Magdalena Ridge Observatory. Captain Aria Chen stood motionless, her reflection ghosting against the reinforced glass of the control room. Strands of black hair escaped her typically precise ponytail, framing a face etched with a mixture of exhaustion and something else. Anticipation. The radio telescope array stretched across the New Mexican landscape like metal fingers reaching into the infinite darkness. Most people saw just another scientific installation. Aria saw something more. A listening post at the edge of human understanding. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up layers of data that would make no sense to anyone else. Encrypted patterns, quantum fluctuations, harmonic resonances that didn't belong to any known transmission protocol. For weeks, she had been tracking an anomaly that her colleagues dismissed as background noise or equipment malfunction. They were wrong. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, no relation to the MIT researcher who would later become famous, leaned over her shoulder. His breath smelled of stale coffee and nervous energy. "Captain, the signal's doing it again." The display erupted in a cascade of fractal patterns, mathematical sequences that twisted and transformed with impossible complexity. It wasn't just a transmission. It was a message, or perhaps a challenge. Unbeknownst to Aria and her team, thousands of light years away, the transmission had already triggered a cascade of events in the Galactic Confederation's most secure communication centers. Bureaucrats and intelligence officers who had long considered Earth a non-entity were about to have their carefully constructed worldview shattered. In the Confederation's central monitoring station, located in a pocket dimension that existed simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, Senior Analyst Zexrel reviewed the intercepted data stream. His multi-segmented appendages moved with practiced efficiency, cross-referencing the signal against millennia of documented communication patterns. Something was wrong. The signal didn't match any known technological signature. It wasn't just advanced, it was fundamentally different. Each time, Zexrel thought he had isolated its core structure, the transmission would shift, revealing new layers of complexity that defied standard analytical models. "Impossible," he muttered in the telepathic language of his species, a sound that translated roughly to a combination of mathematical equations and emotional resonance. Back on Earth, Aria wasn't waiting for validation. She had already begun her own preparations. If this was first contact, and her instincts screamed that it was, humanity needed to be ready. The observatory's standard communication protocols were being bypassed. She was routing the signal through a custom-built quantum encryption system of her own design. "Michael," she said, her voice calm despite the electricity crackling through the room, "wake up Dr. Harrison. Tell her we need the quantum entanglement team here now." The young scientist looked like he might argue, then thought better of it. Captain Chen's reputation was built on turning impossible scenarios into breakthrough moments. Outside, the telescope array continued its silent vigil. Mechanical components that looked like simple scientific equipment were, in fact, far more sophisticated than any external observer could imagine. Each dish, each receiver, was part of a larger, more complex system, a listening post that was about to change everything humanity understood about its place in the universe. The signal pulsed, waited, watched. Humanity was about to have its first real conversation with the cosmos, and nothing would ever be the same again. The void whisper emerged from quantum translation space with less grace than Commander Krulax would have preferred. A subtle vibration ran through the ship's bioorganic hull. Something was wrong, though none of his crew seemed to notice. Krulax was Archon, a species evolved from deep-sea predators of a methane-rich world. His body was a marvel of biological engineering. 6 limbs capable of independent motion, each ending in neural-linked manipulation appendages, translucent membranes covered eyes that could perceive spectrum ranges humans couldn't even imagine. Yet for all their technological superiority, something about this mission felt different. Preliminary scan. He barked to sensor specialist Freen, the youngest of his crew and perpetually bored with routine assignments. Vreen's tentacles danced across living interface panels, organic circuits pulsing with bioluminescent light. Standard procedure for a Class 7 reconnaissance mission. Identify, catalog, dismiss. Another unremarkable planetary system in the vast galactic catalog. The first anomaly appeared almost immediately. Commander, Vreen's voice shifted from bored to confused. The planetary communication networks are complex, far more complex than our initial probes suggested. Krillax leaned forward. Initial reports had categorized this world, Earth, as a primitive ecosystem, basic radio communications, rudimentary computational technologies. Nothing to warrant serious investigation. The sensor displays told a different story. Satellite networks that shouldn't exist, communication protocols that twisted and transformed with impossible speed, digital infrastructures that seemed to breathe and adapt in real time. These weren't the rigid, predictable systems of a developing civilization. These were living, evolving networks. Filter and analyze, Krillax commanded, a hint of tension threading through his typically emotionless voice. What they didn't know was that they were being watched, not just observed, studied. In a nondescript facility outside San Francisco, a team of human analysts had been tracking the alien vessel since the moment it translated into their solar system. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a quantum communication specialist with a reputation for impossible breakthroughs, was coordinating their response. "They're using a quantum masking protocol," she muttered, fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Impressive, but not impenetrable. Her team was a collection of humanity's brightest minds. Former military cryptographers, theoretical physicists, and communication specialists who had spent years preparing for this moment. First contact was no longer a question of if, but when. Back on the Void Whisper, Krillax was experiencing something unprecedented. Doubt. The planetary defense systems were unlike anything in the galactic database. Multiple layers of redundancy. Communication networks that seemed to predict and adapt faster than any known technological system. And most disturbing of all, they were being watched. A small satellite, clearly human-made, but with modifications that suggested something far more advanced, matched their ship's stealth capabilities perfectly. It wasn't just tracking them. It was learning from them. "Commander," Vreen's voice broke the tension. "I'm detecting multiple communication pathways. They're not just receiving our passive scans. They're interpreting them, responding to them." Krillax felt something his species rarely experienced: genuine fear. Humanity was not what the Galactic Confederation had been told. Not even close. The Void Whisper hung in space, a predator suddenly realizing it might be the prey. First contact was happening, and nothing would ever be the same again. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez's laboratory looked like the aftermath of a controlled explosion. Holographic displays hung in midair, frozen moments of complex equations and alien schematics. Fragments of technology from a dozen different sources, some procured through official channels, most definitely not, were suspended in quantum stasis fields. He hadn't slept in 72 hours, not that anyone could tell. The fragment of Zarkon communication technology glowed with an otherworldly iridescence. Most scientists would have spent years, decades, trying to understand its basic principles. Marcus was rebuilding it before lunch. He spoke to the laboratory's quantum AI assistant. "Run quantum entanglement simulation. Parameter set Omega-7. The holographic displays erupted in a dance of mathematical possibilities. Where other researchers saw barriers, Marcus saw puzzles. Where alien civilizations spent centuries perfecting a single technological breakthrough, humans compressed entire evolutionary cycles into months. Outside the laboratory, the world continued its usual rhythm. But inside, something extraordinary was happening. The Zarkon communication module was a marvel of biotechnological engineering. Quantum-linked neural networks that could transmit information across impossible distances. Adaptive encryption that changed its own mathematical structure millisecond by millisecond. technology so advanced it made human communication systems look like children's walkie-talkies. Marcus was going to make it look like a toy phone. His fingers moved with a surgeon's precision, neural link interfaces allowing him to manipulate quantum states as easily as most people might adjust a light switch. Each deconstruction revealed new layers of complexity. Each layer became another opportunity for human innovation. "Fascinating," he muttered, a word that didn't begin to capture the magnitude of what he was discovering. The module wasn't just a communication device. It was a living network. Adaptive, responsive, capable of learning and transforming itself in real time. Traditional human understanding of technology suggested such a system would be unstable, chaotic. Marcus was about to prove it could be revolutionary. A notification pinged. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, no relation, though they often joked about their shared last name, was requesting a preliminary report. She was coordinating the broader first contact response team, and Marcus knew she would want immediate results. He prepared a summary that would make the Galactic Confederation's top researchers question everything they thought they knew about technological development. The key wasn't just understanding the alien technology. It was reimagining what technology could be. By midnight, Marcus had not only decoded the communication module's primary functions, but had begun developing a human adaptation that would make the original look primitive. Quantum communication networks that could adapt faster than any known system. Encryption protocols that didn't just protect information but actively transformed it. This wasn't just reverse engineering. This was technological evolution at speeds that would terrify any other civilization. When the first prototype powered up, the laboratory's quantum sensors went wild. For a brief moment, every digital system in a 5-mile radius flickered. Computers rebooted. Cell phones reset. Traffic lights danced their own impossible symphony. And in that moment, humanity took another step toward rewriting the rules of technological possibility. The Galactic Confederation's Grand Diplomatic Chamber was a marvel of architectural impossibility. Suspended in a pocket dimension, its walls shifted between translucent crystal and living biomatter, reflecting the collected consciousness of 1,000 civilizations. Delegates from across the known universe sat in their designated zones, each species occupying a space tailored to their unique physiological requirements. Ambassador Elena Kovic walked in wearing a simple black suit that looked almost primitive compared to the elaborate bio-augmented attire of other delegates. They underestimated her, spectacularly. The current session was supposed to be a routine discussion of territorial expansions and resource allocation. The Zarkon Imperium had submitted a classified report about a potential emerging threat from a previously overlooked planetary system. Most delegates were already dismissing it as bureaucratic paranoia. Elena's smile was razor-thin. "Distinguished representatives," she began, her voice carrying through the chamber's quantum translation systems, "I'd like to address the recent report concerning Earth." The room shifted. Subtle movements. Alien appendages repositioning. Sensory clusters realigning. Every species had its tell, and Elena read them like an open book. Her presentation was a masterpiece of strategic communication. Economic projections danced across holographic displays. Each graph, each data point was a precisely crafted weapon. She demonstrated how human technological development could disrupt, or enhance, existing galactic trade networks. Where other diplomats saw threats, she revealed opportunities. The Keltheri Trade Consortium was the first to show interest. Their economic tendrils were already calculating potential profit margins. The Quantum Collaborative noticed how human communication technologies could revolutionize their existing network infrastructures. But it was the political maneuvering that truly set Elena apart. She didn't just present information. She exposed the intricate web of political tensions that had existed, unacknowledged, between various galactic powers. A subtle reference here. A carefully constructed economic scenario there. Each statement was a precisely placed chess piece. The Zarkon representative, the same bureaucratic class that had initially dismissed humanity, was slowly changing color. their bioluminescent skin cycling through threat responses that translated roughly to mounting panic. "Humanity does not seek to conquer," Alina said, her voice cutting through the chamber's ambient noise. "We seek to collaborate, on our terms." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. By the session's end, the Galactic Confederation's carefully maintained power structure had been fundamentally reimagined. Humanity wasn't just being acknowledged. They were being courted. Behind the diplomatic facade, Alina allowed herself the briefest moment of satisfaction. Her team, a collection of economists, linguists, and strategic analysts, had spent years preparing for this moment. They had studied every known galactic civilization's communication protocols, economic systems, and political vulnerabilities. The alien delegates were still processing what had just happened. They had entered the chamber expecting to discuss a potential containment strategy for a primitive species. They were leaving with complex trade agreements and strategic partnerships. Humanity had just played the most sophisticated diplomatic game in galactic history, and they had won before most species even realized a game was being played. The pocket dimension that housed the diplomatic chamber seemed to hold its breath. Something fundamental had changed. The Centauri corridor burned. Commander Sarah Okoro watched the holographic battle display, her neural interface crackling with real-time tactical information. The Zarkon Imperium's fleet looked impressive. Massive dreadnoughts that had crushed a dozen civilizations, quantum disruptors that could theoretically shred matter at the molecular level, weapon systems that had been the stuff of galactic legend for centuries. They didn't understand what they were fighting against. Humanity's fleet wasn't a collection of ships. It was a living, breathing organism of adaptive intelligence. Each vessel was more than a weapon. It was a node in a quantum-entangled neural network that learned and evolved with every microsecond of conflict. "Tactical analysis," Sarah commanded, her voice calm despite the chaos surrounding her. The AI response was instantaneous, not a simple computational output, but a dynamic strategic projection that rewrote battle tactics in real time. The Zarkon attack followed every known principle of galactic warfare. Massive forward assault, concentrated energy weapon bombardment, precise mathematical models of attack and defense developed over millennia of conflict. Humanity ignored those models entirely. The first wave of human ships didn't just defend. They transformed. Modular combat systems reconfigured themselves mid-battle. Where a traditional military would see a breach, these ships saw an opportunity. Damaged sections became new attack vectors. Lost ships redistributed their computational power to remaining vessels. It wasn't just warfare. It was evolution in real time. Aboard the Zarkon flagship Voidhammer, Commander Krillax, the same officer who had first detected human signals, watched in growing horror. Their tactical eye, once the most advanced in the known galaxy, was being systematically outmaneuvered. The human ships moved like living things. No predetermined path. No standard attack pattern. Each moment was a new calculation, a new possibility. "They're not following any known combat protocol," his tactical officer screamed, tentacles writhing in panic. Sarah Okoro allowed herself the briefest smile. Traditional warfare was about winning battles. Human warfare was about redefining the entire concept of conflict. The quantum communication network that linked the human fleet was unlike anything in galactic history. Each ship was simultaneously a weapon, a sensor, a communication node, and a learning system. Damage wasn't just repaired, it was adapted into new tactical advantages. A Zarkon dreadnought would take hours to recalibrate after a critical hit. A human vessel would reconfigure its entire combat strategy in milliseconds. By the battle's third hour, the Centauri corridor was no longer a battlefield. It was a laboratory of military evolution. The Zarkon had brought massive weapons. Humanity brought something far more dangerous: the ability to learn faster than the enemy could attack. When the final quantum signatures faded, only human vessels remained, not through superior firepower, but through a fundamental reimagining of what warfare could be. Commander Okoro closed the tactical display. Another message would be sent. Not a declaration of victory, but an invitation. Adapt, or be left behind. The algorithm began as a simple experiment. Dr. Amara Okonkwo hadn't intended to change the course of galactic civilization when she started her research. A quantum musicologist with a background in neural network design, she was exploring the mathematical relationships between emotional states and sonic frequencies. What emerged was something far more profound. The composition was unlike anything in recorded history. Not music in the traditional sense, but a complex mathematical language that spoke directly to the neural pathways of sentient beings. When it was first broadcast across the galactic communication networks, entire civilizations simply stopped. On the methane-rich homeworld of the Zarkon, entire cities went silent. The quantum-linked communication networks that formed the backbone of their society began to resonate with something unprecedented: pure, unfiltered emotional complexity. It wasn't just sound, it was experience. The composition mapped emotional landscapes that transcended linguistic barriers, mathematical sequences that could make a silicon-based life form weep, harmonic progressions that revealed the intricate dance of consciousness itself. Alien philosophers would later call it the human resonance, a cultural touchstone that fundamentally altered how sentient beings understood communication, emotion, and collective experience. But it was just the beginning. Human art began to spread like a mimetic virus across galactic networks. A short story written by a teenage author in Mumbai could trigger philosophical revolutions on distant planetary systems. A street dance performance from New York would become a new form of political expression for species that had never understood the concept of individual movement. The quantum collaborative, a loose network of advanced civilizations, was the first to fully comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. Human cultural exports weren't just entertainment. They were a form of soft power more potent than any military strategy. Individual agency, the celebration of diverse perspectives, the belief that consciousness was not a fixed state, but a continuous process of becoming. These were dangerous ideas. On the crystalline world of the Keltheri, entire social structures began to collapse. Their rigid, hierarchical society couldn't withstand the human concept of individual potential. Young Keltheri began demanding the right to choose their own paths, a notion that would have been unthinkable mere months earlier. Dr. Okonkwo watched the unfolding transformation with a mixture of wonder and concern. She had been studying the mathematical language of emotion for decades. But this was something else entirely. The human cultural revolution wasn't about conquest. It was about connection. Every piece of art, every musical composition, every philosophical treatise became a bridge. Not a bridge between cultures, but between fundamental ways of understanding existence itself. Alien sociologists would later describe it as the most profound cultural transformation in galactic history. Humanity hadn't fired a shot. They had simply shared their way of seeing the universe, and everything changed. In universities across multiple star systems, a new field of study emerged: human cultural dynamics. Scholars would spend generations trying to understand how a single species could fundamentally reshape the collective consciousness of multiple civilizations. The answer was deceptively simple: by being unabashedly, completely, remarkably human. The laboratory was a cathedral of impossible potential. Dr. Aisha Okik stood at the center of humanity's greatest breakthrough, surrounded by quantum processors that hummed with a sound just beyond the edge of human hearing. Her team had been working towards this moment for decades, a convergence of consciousness transfer, quantum mechanics, and a fundamental reimagining of what it meant to exist. The alien observers watched through quantum-linked transmission arrays, their sensory clusters struggling to comprehend what was happening. This wasn't just technology. This was transcendence. The first test subject was Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, the same researcher who had previously dismantled alien communication technologies. Volunteers had been scarce, but Marcus had never been one to shy away from the impossible. "System check," Aisha commanded, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Quantum consciousness transfer wasn't about moving a mind from one body to another. It was about existing simultaneously across multiple dimensional states. Where other species saw consciousness as a linear experience, humans were about to prove it was something far more fluid. The first indication that something extraordinary was happening came subtle: a quantum fluctuation, a momentary synchronization of probability waves that shouldn't have been possible. Marcus's body remained perfectly still, but something was changing. Alien scientists watching the transmission began to panic. Their communication networks erupted in a cascade of warning signals. This wasn't just a technological breakthrough. This was a fundamental challenge to everything they understood about the nature of existence. Consciousness began to map itself across multiple dimensional states, not just copying, not just transferring, expanding. Dr. O'Keefe's team had developed a technology that could map consciousness as a dynamic fluid entity. Memories became malleable. Experience became a navigable landscape. The boundaries between physical and non-physical began to dissolve. Quantum synchronization at 78%, a technician reported, her voice trembling. The alien observers saw something impossible. Marcus wasn't just present in one location. He was simultaneously existing across multiple potential states, a living, breathing demonstration of quantum superposition that defied every known law of physics. When the process completed, the world changed. Marcus opened his eyes, or perhaps they were eyes. The definition had become wonderfully uncertain. Fascinating, he said, a word that didn't begin to capture the magnitude of what had just occurred. The Galactic Confederation's most advanced scientists were witnessing the obsolescence of their entire understanding of consciousness. Humanity had not just developed a new technology. They had rewritten the fundamental rules of existence. Dimensional barriers became permeable. Consciousness became a journey rather than a fixed state. The human mind revealed itself as something far more extraordinary than anyone had ever imagined. Dr. O'Keefe allowed herself the briefest moment of satisfaction. This was more than a scientific breakthrough. This was an evolutionary leap. Humanity had always been defined by its ability to reimagine limitations. Now they were reimagining the very nature of existence itself. The quantum processors continued to hum. Possibility itself seemed to hold its breath. The new galactic map hung in the Confederation's central chamber, a living, breathing representation of a universe forever changed. Where Earth had once been a blank space, a forgotten margin, now pulsed with an intensity that defied traditional cartographic understanding. It wasn't just a point of origin. It was a nexus of possibility. Ambassador Elena Kovic stood before the holographic display, watching as quantum dynamic lines traced connections that had never existed before. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had transformed it. The transformation had been subtle at first. A communication breakthrough here, a technological innovation there, cultural exchanges that rewrote fundamental understanding of consciousness, military adaptations that challenged every known strategic doctrine. Now, everything was different. The Zarkon Imperium, once the most feared military power in the known galaxy, had been completely restructured. Their rigid hierarchical society had been dismantled by human concepts of individual agency and adaptive thinking. Where they once saw strength in uniformity, they now understood the power of diverse perspectives. The quantum collaborative had become something entirely new. No longer a loose network of advanced civilizations, but a dynamic, constantly evolving ecosystem of shared knowledge and potential. Humanity's quantum consciousness research had shown them that existence itself was far more fluid than they had ever imagined. It's not about dominance, Elena murmured to herself. It's about potential. Alien civilizations that had once viewed humanity as a potential threat now sought to understand them. Every diplomatic meeting became an exchange of possibilities. Every technological conference a reimagining of what could be. Dr. Aisha O'Keefe's quantum consciousness research had spread far beyond human understanding. Species that had once been confined to their biological limitations now explored existence as a malleable concept. Consciousness became a journey, not a destination. The military strategists who had once prepared for conflict now studied human adaptation as a form of philosophical practice. Commander Sarah Okoro's tactical innovations had become required study in every advanced civilization's strategic academy. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez's work on communication technologies had transformed how sentient beings understood connection. The algorithms developed in his small laboratory now formed the backbone of galactic communication networks. The silence that had once filled the unmapped edges of the galaxy was gone, replaced by a symphony of possibility. Humanity hadn't conquered. They had invited other species to see beyond their limitations, to understand that potential was not a fixed point, but a continuous journey of discovery. That consciousness was not a state of being, but a process of becoming. The alien observers who had once dismissed humanity now watched with a mixture of wonder and barely contained excitement. Each breakthrough was an invitation to reimagine everything they thought they knew. As the holographic map pulsed with living connections, it told a story far beyond simple territorial expansion. This was a map of potential, of transformation, of a universe learning to see itself differently. Elena Kovic smiled. Humanity's greatest strength had never been its technology, its military might, or its diplomatic skill. It had always been its ability to look at the impossible and see only opportunity. The galaxy would never be the same again.